Hey everyone, it's Brandon. Some of the earlier videos on this channel were about me living in my car. That whole experience went on and off for about a year, but even after I stopped living in my Honda Civic, I would still get people commenting on those videos and asking if I was still living there. As a response to those comments, I started moving down the timeline of my most recent living situations, starting with a super brief but fun couple of weeks living and working in a national park here in California, to the year and a half or so of living out of the office that I worked at. In this video, I wanted to basically bring everything to current day and explain how and why I started living in an Airbnb. To get things started, you may have heard that a good rule of thumb for living expenses is to keep your rent to a third of your total income each month. Now, depending on who you ask, the average rent for a one-bedroom apartment in the city of Los Angeles ranges anywhere from about $1,700 to $2,500 per month, which means if you play it conservatively, you'd need a monthly income of about $5,100, which equates to a salary of just over $60,000 per year in order to fit within that guideline. This was more than I was making, so once I could no longer live in the office, the first obstacle I faced was just finding a place that fit within my budget. Now, the second obstacle I faced at the time was COVID. I needed to move out of the office as soon as possible, but this was right at the beginning of all of the lockdowns that took place when COVID-19 started to become a thing, so it made the pressure of finding a new place to live a lot more challenging. This was because, given the budget constraints I had, the most economical places to consider were shared spaces. For instance, one such setup could be a co-living situation, which is something you can sometimes find in larger cities nowadays, where you basically rent a bed in a shared space. They provide you with flexible leases as well as perks, such as cleaning services, professionally furnished common areas, amenities, and utilities. It's several hundreds of dollars cheaper than a one-bedroom apartment, or in many cases even a studio, but you forego the luxury of having your own private space. The other option for cheaper living would be to rent a room in a house or an apartment with other people. It would be a bit more stable with less people, and there would hardly be anyone moving in and out, but it would still require me to either find an opening online with a few strangers or find a group of friends who just happened to be looking for a roommate. But whether it was co-living or sharing an apartment, there was still the increased health risk of sharing a household with a number of people, all of whom lead their own lives, have their own friends, their own partners, and do their own activities. Not the best situation at the beginning of the spread of a new global virus that shut down the world. The third obstacle was simply finding a place that was close to work. And since my job was about an hour away from my hometown and where I went to college, finding even a single friend that was willing to move to LA on such short notice wasn't very likely. So I tried to think of some other options. I could move back into my car again, but because all of the gyms were closed due to the pandemic, it would be a lot harder to find a place to take a shower. Moving back home with family, that was a definite no. Now, I'll admit that a small part of that decision was due to pride and wanting to feel self-sustaining, but a large part of that was just simply due to a lesson that I learned several years back, which was that reverting back to that environment in which I grew up, just because it was convenient financially, it just wasn't conducive for my personal growth. So yeah, that was out the window. It was then that I got this idea to check out Airbnb. I jumped on the site and searched for places that were close enough to work, had a great looking page, and were open to stays of up to 1 month. Now, the benefit of trying Airbnb was that it would give me a way to find a temporary and non-binding place to stay while I looked for other options or negotiated something with the host. The downside of Airbnb is the fees. Whenever you look at a listing, as you probably know already, you'll notice that you have the price per night, plus a cleaning fee, plus state fees, plus the cut that Airbnb takes. This all adds up super quick. To get around that, I figured I'd try contacting some of the hosts that had a good listing and then asking for a discount in exchange for a month or possibly longer commitment. At a time when COVID shut down all travel and stoked a lot of uncertainty and fear, I figured this would be enticing to an Airbnb host that was having trouble renting out their space. Lo and behold, I found a great looking one-bedroom spot that was less than 10 minutes away from work, had a private entrance, and hosts that were receptive and equally as concerned about cleanliness and COVID safety as I was. The price, however, was almost $2,000, which was obviously way out of my budget, But they were open to negotiation, and so we settled on something that was fair for everyone, which was $1,500. Now remember, there are fees involved with Airbnb, so in order to get to that price, the hosts actually had to be willing to accept $1,300. The extra $200 that I was paying went to the website. So basically, I got a place that was cheaper than most decent one-bedroom apartments in the area, knowing that it would be a temporary place anyways. Last but not least, I figured that if it turned out to be a good living situation and the hosts were as nice in person as they were online, then maybe we could work something out off of Airbnb in the future. And that's exactly what happened. Once the month term was up, we were both happy to extend the agreement and accept $1,300 as the rent, no fees required. And since these weren't professional landlords, I still had the flexibility of choosing just how long my stay would be. As it turns out, I extended my stay by a couple of months, and then a couple of more months, and then a couple more. And so now it's turned out to be almost 1 whole year since I first moved in, and it's worked out great. The hosts have been amazing. They'll sometimes leave fresh vegetables from their garden on my doorstep. It's always felt safe and private, and the apartment itself is beautiful, cozy, and owned by people who care. And so that was my experience finding an Airbnb to live in. At the time that I'm recording this video, we're still in the pandemic, but people are starting to get vaccinated and things are slowly starting to open up again. For now, I love this place and I'm very grateful for it, but even the price that we negotiated down to is still a little bit high for what I'd like to be paying. So who knows exactly where I'll be in the near future, but maybe it'll be some other creative way of living or in a place that I never expected. If you've come up with some creative ways of living during the pandemic, feel free to share that with all of us in the comments. Until then, thanks for watching and see you next time.